Another lesson in our Peaceful Solution Character Education certification course on the parenting manual. We're in lesson 10 today in our parenting manual book, and I want to refresh your memory of where we left off last week in procedure 4. I'm just going to go back over what procedure 4 was. It's on LP 10B. And it says, go over with class the pointers for formulating a reward chart on page 81. Discuss the reward chart. Okay, so page 81 is where we are starting. And we had gone over some of these pointers already, so just to refresh your mind, this is for when parents are putting together a reward chart to motivate their young children, right? And actually, you know, for older ones too need motivation, right? Don't we need motivation sometimes in order to, accomplish a goal? So, in the goals that we're trying to set out to accomplish is really to develop positive moral character in our children and ourselves. So, in formulating a reward chart that is going to motivate a person's child, you want to tell your parents that, as these points say here, be clear about what behaviors you expect and want reinforced. Being clear and expressing to a child what is expected of them is very important. How many of you have ever, made a mistake and you suffer the reality of it in society today of consequences of some sort, but you were never even told that those would be the consequences? Or, if you did something great and you felt rewarded in some way, but you didn't know that would be the outcome, you were surprised by it. Well, if we teach young children what to expect and why they should want to practice certain behaviors, they will understand and they will actually do better at succeeding, because you're setting them up for it, right? Set them up for success. And then the second point was to choose no more than 4 specific behaviors to focus on at one time. And that really depends on their age, right? A 2 and 3-year-old probably doesn't even need 4, right? They could do 1 or 2 things and really get them to focus on those, because you also, as the parent, have to remember, what are the points I'm trying to help my child to work on here? You can always, when they get that down, you can always have a new one, right, that they can work on. But you don't want to overload them or overwhelm them with too much. So that's very important that you just, be very specific in what you want. And there's an example down here we're going to go over. And the third point that we covered last week, choose a reward. Right now, this reward for the chart can be very small. And I even told you last week that you don't even have to have stickers. If you don't have stickers or can't afford them, you can draw. You can have them color in the shade in the blocks as they succeed in making the right choices. So, but you decide how that's going to go, and then what is going to be the reward when they fill in that chart, okay? And you can have them, when they fill in the whole chart, there's something else they're earning at the end, okay? And then point 4, give the reward only after your child demonstrates the desired behavior. Remember, don't reward them for doing the wrong behavior, and don't feel sorry for them. And that sometimes, I think, as, it's important to tell your parents, if they don't do the right thing, you just need to encourage them to make the right choice. Don't discourage them and beat them down for making the wrong choices, but point out to them, well, if they're saying, well, I want my sticker, or when will I get a reward? When will I get the reward? When you make the right choice. That's what you need to teach the parents, to be firm that that's when you will get the reward, when you choose to make the choice. And, that's something even small children have an amazing ability to understand, if they want something, how to get it. And they'll learn very quickly if they can break the parent down by asking and asking and asking, or just whining and crying and throwing a fit on the floor, Or if the parent is going to say, no, you need to do it the right way, okay? And then they'll see, okay, this is how I get the reward. But that's up to the parent to really make sure they're consistent in. And we're going to talk a lot about consistency tonight too. So then point 5 is to keep the reward system active as long as the problem exists. So you start out really gung-ho with it the first week, right? And by the second week, you're still doing it, but you're kind of missing here and there the behavior a little bit, letting it slide. By the third week, oh, I need to make another chart. I forgot to make a chart this week, or I forgot to start the chart over for the child, or I didn't even look at the chart yesterday. What did they do yesterday? As parents, that consistency is really going to help them fix the problem. But it isn't on the child, okay? And that's something I want you all to stress to the parents when you're teaching them. All of this responsibility is on the parents. The child is like a blank slate, okay? Until we teach them how to conduct themselves, we cannot expect them to know how. And they will learn how to conduct themselves from somewhere, but wouldn't you rather it be the right thing that you're wanting them to do, and that they start modeling it because you consistently point it out to them daily that they can do it, but you have to be on board and really encouraging the parents that, they will get to that expert level, as it says here. They will become an expert, but the parents have to look for it. They have to see it. And the child will model it once the parent is pointing it out to them. Oh, you did it. Great job. You asked. Whatever behavior the parent wants to see in the child, they need to really be careful and look for that behavior and really reward them with praise, not just the sticker on the chart, but make a big deal out of it, because this is the positive outcome that you're looking for. And when we make a big deal, when children do great, you're going to see them really flourish and desire more of that positive, reinforcement from their parents, okay? So we left off there with number 5 last week. So point number 6 here is to develop point number 6 is consequences are as important as rewards, but they must be age appropriate. And I underlined that, okay? These are the important points about consequences. Age appropriate, suit the behavior, and the child must fully understand them, okay? Just like what you want them to do, they must understand what you're asking of them to do to earn the reward. They must also understand what the consequences are when they're disobedient or when they don't follow through and do what you've been asking them to do. And remember, your goal is to help them to develop positive character traits, right? So these behaviors will be instilled in them, and the more they do it, the less there'll be the need for the consequences. So it continues here, and I underlined this several times. Do not be excessive when giving out consequences, okay? Here's a great example. The child failed to pick up his clothes from the floor. The consequence of no dessert for a month would be considered excessive for one time not picking up their clothes, one infraction, it says here. Yeah, that would be quite excessive. After the first week, the child would forget why they have no dessert for a month, but they just know they have no dessert for a month. And that seems quite overzealous of the parent, really, I'm going to stop this behavior, But how does that make the child look at the parent? Wow, that's pretty harsh, right? And put yourself in the child's position of, man, I just didn't, I'll do better. I can do better. They might not think they can do better. Then they might not say, well, why should I even try? I already can't have dessert for a month. It's great to try to put yourself back in a child's thinking to see, well, what might they consider, what might be going on with them, and then listen to them too. Listen to them, because this is also about working with them. And remember, as we talked about last week too, about making a plan and agreeing upon these things, especially with the older ones. They have, you know, it's great if they're on board and they understand if they don't come home at this such and such time, then this is the consequence. You know, they're not going to be able to go out for a week or a month. You know, what is appropriate for that age and for the behavior that they're showing, because you're putting trust in them to come home at a certain time. So, but don't be excessive here in giving consequences. It says a more reasonable consequence would be not getting the agreed upon reward for that. You know, if they had cleaned up, what was the reward they were going to get? That makes a lot more sense, and to the child, you know, and that's what we have to always remember as adults, what makes sense to a child. Okay, make sure the parents understand what makes sense to them and seems right to them isn't necessarily going to be understood by a child, because their level of thinking is different than an adult's level of thinking. Several infractions could result in a loss of a privilege. Okay, so if they're a repeat offender of not cleaning up, you know, cleaning up their room, well, now they could lose a privilege because it's been instructed, they know what's expected of them, and you know, they've also suffered small consequences. It's not really changing the situation. So, you know, I have to resort to something a little, you know, a little greater. Always give the child something to work towards, though. Okay, so again, you're going to hear me say that a lot. Set the child up to succeed. That is what our parents should see. Because when you do that, you have to also understand the parents will succeed, okay? And we know, you know, these parents coming and taking these classes, that's why they're taking the classes. They want to do better as parents. They want to make better choices for their children so their children can have, you know, possibly even, you know, a type of parenting style they didn't have when they were children, that they can change anything they haven't learned and incorporate it into their parenting style, and, you know, make it a positive experience and a rewarding experience for both them and their children. Now, you know, in talking about excessive consequences, make sure you think realistic, not ridiculous, okay? If you can remember like that, be realistic, not ridiculous, and never give a consequence when, this is something we should really have our parents write in their books. Never give a consequence when a parent is angry or out of control, okay? That is not the time to be making decisions about what's going to take place with your child for the immediate future or the next week or the next month or whatever, because emotions are running high. And when emotions are running high, reasoning is running low, okay? So a parent needs time to calm down and think about how they want to respond to the behavior. Think about what actually the child did and why, you know, they need a consequence for it. And then they'll probably remember their plan too, because this should all have you should have a plan here. This should be something agreed upon, not, you know, that they understand in advance. If I am disobedient to this rule or these instructions, then this is what's going to come. So they're not caught off guard or by surprise either, the children. So, you know, take the time to think clearly and give children something realistic to work on. And you're going to hear a lot about that tonight. In our second teacher, she's got some great suggestions of how to deal with different problems and in a realistic way for different ages even. Now, down here, it says at the bottom, the last paragraph says, the following chart can be used as an example to set up your behavioral chart. Each time your child follows the rules listed, allow him or her to put a sticker in the box. When the entire chart is filled in, an additional reward could be given for having completed the chart. Also, don't forget to give lots of verbal encouragement and praise along the way. And as I said that before, that is probably one of the most rewarding things that a child can receive from their parent, is them being praised for doing a great job, for making the right choice, for doing what the parent has told them is expected of them, because that is going to build within a child a sense of self-worth and self-esteem that is like a foundation for the rest of their life. They'll take that with them the rest of their life, whether they were built up as a child or they were tore down. And those are the two ways that parents can do. They can build their children up with their words, or they can completely tear them down and make them feel worthless and like, I don't even know why I try. And we see in society a lot of children today who feel that way. And I think it's mostly for a lack of the parents taking the time to recognize their children need something from them like that. Yes, we feed them and clothe them and give them a place to live, but do we see to their what they need in their heart every day, and what they need for their mind every day to be healthy and to to think about themselves in a healthy way. Okay, so this rewards and consequences, this lesson seems very basic, but at the same time, it really is building a very important foundation that they will carry with them for the rest of their lives. And I just wanted to quick show this here. Let me make a copy of it. If I can put that on the screen, the chart down here. And it says, does assign chores, asks permission before touching others' belongings, and stays close to mom and dad when in public. Okay? And so then they fill that in there. And like I said, they can color it too. It doesn't have to be stickers. And down here at the bottom it says reward them for completing the chart, with an ice cream cone or a popsicle or something they enjoy. Going outside and spending time with you. In this day and age, that is a very valuable thing to a child also, just spending time with their parents, doing something that both like to enjoy, and especially the child likes to enjoy. If you don't really like to enjoy it, do it anyway, because your child will be so appreciative that you took that time to do something with them. And you don't have to tell them you don't like it, but just do it with them and bring joy to them for a little bit, because think of how rewarding children are and how much joy they bring us when they do the right thing. And as you watch them grow, it's a very rewarding process. It's very difficult sometimes, but it really is very rewarding. And so we get a lot from our children, and giving back to them in small ways is really important. We're training them to one day be parents. So, what kind of parents do you want what do you want to pass on to them as parents? All right. So that's the rest of procedure 4. And we're going to turn back to LP 10B and read procedure 5, which says have volunteers read the last 2 paragraphs under the heading Be Consistent on page 82. Reiterate the importance of consistency when training children. Okay, so that it's back on page 82 here. And we're going to spend some time here tonight because, we can do all the right things, but if we don't do them consistently, it's not going to help the child, right? They're going to fall back into habits. They're not going to create positive habits or behaviors. It's not going to be consistent. So, consistency is, I had a definition here for you. Yeah, let's put up that first slide. And consistency, this is from the responsibility unit, page 79. C is for consistent. And it says to be consistent is to think and act in the same manner all the time. Consistency is another important trait in maintaining a responsible character. For example, if you start your homework and chores at the same time every day, you are being consistent. If you only do them when you have nothing else to do, then you are not being consistent. You are consistent only if you display the same characteristics at every opportunity presented to you. And, I want to continue reading this here in the responsibility unit on page 79 because it says, just how important is it to be consistent? Well, consider what it would be like if your parents and guardians only fed you once in a while and you didn't know when you would get your next meal. That would be scary for a child, right? Sadly, there are many children who face this reality and live every day not knowing if or when they will be cared for. Or what if you were the boss of a company and your employees either came to work late or not at all? How would your company function? Would you keep those employees or hire new ones? Many things in life depend upon consistent actions and interactions. When your behavior is both positive and consistent, you are building a responsible character. So that's one really important reason we want to be consistent with our children. And this is something to stress to the parents, because not only are they becoming responsible, they are teaching their children to be responsible. And I wanted to give you another definition. I had two definitions here. Another definition you can put in your book is consistent means unchanging in nature, standard, or effect over time. Unchanging in nature, standard, or effect over time. And that standard really pops out to me, because when our children understand we have a standard, that right there is going to help them a lot, because they'll know their limits, and they'll know that, oh, you don't say that to mother, you don't do that to father. You're teaching them. They're also learning respect in that too, that okay, this is the standard they're holding me to, they hold themselves to it, right? So that it's an unchanging standard, and an unchanging which has a positive effect over time. Okay, so I said before, and I'm going to repeat this too, and there's in being consistent, we need to continually evaluate ourselves. As teachers, we need to evaluate ourselves. How are we teaching these parents? Are we consistently modeling for them and covering these lessons appropriately for them, so that they have the tools to go and nurture their children and really guide their children to become positive, productive citizens? Parents should continually evaluate themselves. So, and if I just wanted to point back here, if you look back in your book to, I looked it up and then I didn't write the page number down, but it was back here in one of our early lessons. There was an evaluation on page 15, parenting self-analysis. And you can use that as a guide for what to be evaluating yourselves on. You can tell the parents they can be evaluating themselves with that, but also just like on a daily basis at night, before they go to bed. Okay, how just a little check, mental check. How did I do today? How did they do today? What could we do better, right? What could I do better? And one of the main things that we should be looking for and telling our parents, asking them, are they giving proper attention to their children? A lot of times parents will come with behavior problems. My child won't stop doing this, and my child won't stop doing that. They won't listen to me, and they won't pick up their room, and all the negative things they see, right? And they're very easy to see because they stand out to us as adults. But when we give children love and we show care to them and concern and respect, they don't have a need for all the negative anymore, the negative behavior, because they're receiving what they really desire. They want a parent's acceptance and genuine love and attention. And if they don't get it, you're going to see negative behavior. That is what we have to get through to our parents. That is where it generally comes from, okay? So the negative behavior, we can deal with it, but don't accentuate that. Accentuate the positive. So in here it says, the first paragraph, one of the most important aspects of teaching children self-control with this simple method of implementing rules is to be consistent. Consistency is often one of the hardest traits to maintain for many people. They start off a new venture with zeal and excitement, but after a while their interest slowly decreases and eventually they lose interest. When it comes to training our children, I underline this, we cannot afford to lose interest. No, we cannot. Can I see my next overhead? This is from the Building Moral Excellence, page 18. Wait, is that the next one? Yes. And it says, as important as, well, I want to read about the middle of it here, where it's highlighted. Parents are also responsible for teaching children how to make moral decisions that will show respect for all life. Parents who provide a safe environment and meet the physical needs of their children, as well as consistently display moral principles, are more likely to have children who also develop positive moral principles regarding themselves and others. Okay, and that's Building Moral Excellence, page 18. And then if we continue here, I also underline this in our books. We must be consistent when implementing rules and holding children accountable for their behavior. In this way, we will maintain credibility in the eyes of our children. For example, every time your child stands up on a chair, remind him to sit down because it is not safe. Do not neglect to remind him of what the correct behavior is. Rewards or consequences can be added to help them make the right choice. Okay, because that's what your goal is to get them to make the right choice. So if they're not doing it just by you telling them, then you can implement the reward system or consequences. But the key is to point it out every time, and not ignore it ever. And that can be hard sometimes, but it is very important that it's done that way. Because then the child sees your standard. Remember that standard you have? Oh, mommy doesn't want me to stand up on the chair. And that will sink into their minds over time. A lack of consistency on your part says to your child that you are not serious. Okay, that is the message we send to children when we make that choice. We're not serious about helping them change their behavior, and we're willing to tolerate their poor conduct. If you're seeing children just run around and the parents don't do anything about it, that is a lack of teaching them, how to deal with that behavior, first of all, and then to continuously do it, to continuously not give up on that child, keep guiding them back to the proper behavior. Never use the excuses of being too tired, pretending you didn't notice, embarrassed, and embarrassment is a big one for parents. So many parents get embarrassed by their children's behavior, but you know what? That is important that we understand. It's more important to guide our child in a right way than to be embarrassed by their behavior. They're just learning. Children are just learning. They're going to do the wrong thing. And we have to understand that and not be embarrassed by it, but be embarrassed if we're not teaching them the right way. That's the only thing we should be embarrassed by. And I want to put up here for you this news flash. Yeah, this news flash here. Because children are not clueless. They are perfectly capable of figuring out that if you allow them to break the rules, you are not serious, so why should they be? And they put that all in capital letters in your book for a reason, because, that's really a key thing to remember. They're going to pick up on what the parent does, so we have to encourage the parents that they need consistency. Make sure any negative behavior is pointed out and dealt with appropriately every time. Consistency and perseverance are very important in practicing moral standards. We should not grow tired of doing what is right, for in due time we will have great reward if we do not give up. And that reminds me of Building Moral Excellence, page 21. I want to end with that here tonight. Yeah, we're going to have to skip the perseverance one. I had one for perseverance, but Building Moral Excellence, page 21 is my last one. Yes. An individual who has developed these positive traits and consistently maintains them in his or her interactions with others is a person of integrity. All of these traits help to build a positive character and promote moral principles. So, remember, that is the goal. We're building within a child to have integrity that they will carry with them for the rest of their lives. So be perseverant, be consistent, and I'd like you to be ready for our next teacher here. Please welcome her as she's going to continue on with the rewards and consequences.
Hello, everyone. We are going to continue on right where Jennifer left off. So we're going to flip over. Actually, I want to read at the bottom of page 82. There was a little boy at the bottom of page 82, and he's holding up a certificate, and it says, "I filled up my reward chart, and I got an award for practicing self-control." And when you see that and you think of, well, yeah, they did. Like, I expect them to have self-control. But when you're training a child and you're used to them not having self-control, it means so much to them when they have something that they can hold in their hands that shows at 4, 5, 6 years old, I've achieved something. Not only have I achieved something, but mom and dad or my aunt or my grandparents, they recognize that I achieved something. All right, so just pointing that out to us because I thought that was really adorable. All right, so we're going to go back over to, that concludes procedure 5. So we're going to go over to lesson plan 10 on page 10B. And we're going to go into the activity of procedure 6. Okay, so procedure 6 activity. It says, tell students that they will get an opportunity to practice creating a rewards chart. Divide students into 5 groups and give each group a cutout. Explain the following hypothetical situation, and despite implementing positive disciplinary measures to deal with the behavior you're being assigned, the child persists in demonstrating the problematic behaviors. Remember last week we really underlined and emphasized on that. We're only focusing on the problematic behaviors, not everything they're doing wrong as a whole. Pick one problematic behavior at a time. Devise a reward chart that fits the positive behaviors you desire to see. Determine reasonable rewards and consequences for the child's age. Have students share them with the class. Okay, so in the middle of that paragraph, it says that over the course of this activity, you're going to point out that despite implementing all the positive disciplinary measures, it's still not working. All right, so we're going to really quick review a few of the measures that we have learned in this unit. So if you flip over to page 13, we're just going to highlight a few of the main points that we've covered so far over this book. On page 13, it is entitled Acknowledging Mistakes and Finding Solutions. Okay, in the second paragraph, it says, the mistakes in parenting that we are referring to do not include verbal, physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, nor do they include being negligent towards the needs of the child. These types of abuses are not mistakes, okay? So we want to define that when we go into consequences and discipline. All right, so we'll go over to page 14. And in the first full paragraph, it says the mistakes in parenting that we're referring to, so we're not talking about emotional, physical, or sexual abuse. The mistakes in parenting that we are referring to are those times when you might respond impatiently when dealing with a child by using a harsh tone of voice instead of a kind and gentle tone. Examples of other mistakes is not setting proper limits or rules for your child, such as not having a bedtime or allowing the child to do whatever he wants just to get them out of your hair. Not correcting disrespectful behaviors, such as backtalk or having tantrums, and not setting a proper example. Children need guidance and structure in their lives in order to help them grow into productive, well-adjusted people. Okay, so have that in our mind as we go into these scenarios. All right, so we're going to jump to page 20. So if you look over to page 20, this is under taking on a positive moral character. We're going to read the third paragraph. Okay, on page 20, paragraph 3. To become a positive, effective parent, you must carefully evaluate your character in order to weed out negative, undesirable traits. So remember, as we're growing with our child, as we're setting rewards and consequences with them, as parents, we're constantly reevaluating our character as well, because our character ultimately is what our child is going to reflect in their actions. All right, so if you flip over to page 21, they give us an evaluation as parents. And I would encourage you, as you're teaching your parents this activity in class, to have them review this scenario page, because it gives you different examples. Like, you give your child an instruction and he disobeys you. Always, sometimes, or never. Have them take these activities, each different scenario, and go through this chart. So you can refer back to them what you've covered so far, and then it'll come to a conclusion here. All right, so we're going to go to page 30. All right, so if we go to page 30, under your role as a disciplinarian. All right, we're going to read in the middle of paragraph 1. It says, moral character education trains and molds a child's mind, behavior, and character. Positive discipline is respectful of the child and his or her needs. Someone who practices positive discipline will not call a child names or embarrass that child in any way. Okay, and if you jump down to the bottom of paragraph 2, it says positive discipline is proactive. It provides structure, a consistent routine, guidance, and correction. When you discipline proactively, you can avoid major behavioral problems. Positive discipline is ongoing, it's patient, merciful, and compassionate training, whereas negative discipline is sporadic, inconsistent, and aggressive. And that goes with what Jennifer was just talking about, with being inconsistent with, our correction and with putting in place rewards or consequences and implementing them. All right, so we're going to jump to page 39. And on page 39, it says additional steps to developing self-control. Okay, and I'm just going to point out the 2 points at the bottom. And it says, have a plan to handle your triggers appropriately when they arise. And remember, going back to evaluating as parents, remind our parents to always evaluate themselves. If you have a trigger of a child talking back to you, and maybe your hand flies out before you realize you've even hit the child, that's a trigger for you. So when somebody is talking back to you, make a conscious, okay, so I know in this situation my child is always going to have something to say. I know that they're going to talk back. How am I going to handle the situation? And talk yourself through it before you walk into the situation so that you're recognizing your triggers. It says you want to remain as calm as possible so that you can think morally and not respond impulsively or emotionally. And then the point at the bottom says use the STOP acronym. Always stop, think, considering all of our options, and then proceeding with the choice that is beneficial to both parties. All right, so we're going to flip over to page 44. Under simple steps to developing self-control, I'm going to read points 2, 3, and 4. Okay, point 2 says guard the environment of your child. Remember, the environment encompasses everything that externally affects the child. And we're really going to be referencing back to this point as we go through the activity. Point number 2. Do not use the television as a babysitter or a companion. Often, busy moms allow their children to watch television, and this is one of the most damaging things that parents can do, especially if you're not watching it with them or being aware of what is going into their minds. Point number 4, do not allow your child to play violent video games or listen to violent, sexually oriented music. This type of entertainment has blatant as well as subliminal messages that can negatively influence your child. Okay, and then we're going to flip over to page 54. On page 54 is general tips for teaching anger management skills, and we're just going to read the headings of all the points. Okay, the first one is keep your cool. Number 2 is be patient. 3, take the time to teach as well as correct. And we're going to go into that a little bit. Whenever we're interacting with our child, the only time we interact with them should not be when we're correcting them or when we're telling them what they did wrong. And it's so important to remind our parents and impress that upon them. If that's the only form of interaction they get, then we have to question ourselves, why are they acting out so much if that's the only time we give them undivided attention? Point number 4, use active listening. 5, don't expect perfect results right away. That was 5, sorry. Number 6, talk to your child about his or her behavior and how you plan to help him demonstrate proper conduct. Okay, so remember, you're making it a teamwork. You're working with them to overcome or to push past these situations. Number 7, institute a calm down time. 8, remember to use rules and a reward system. And 9, process the experience. Talk through it with your child. Once they've gotten through the consequence, whether they lost something for a week or they weren't able to go outside, ask them how they felt in that moment. When you've seen everybody else going outside and you were stuck inside, how are you feeling right now? Are you sad? Are you disappointed? Are you angry? Okay, remember that feeling the next time you want to disobey what I've set for you to do. Think of that moment and how much regret you have that you wouldn't have done that so that you could go outside and play with everyone else. Process that experience with them, and then they're able to recognize for themselves why they would rather follow instructions. All right, so we're going to jump to page 63. And on page 63, it's entitled, It Starts With You. If we take a closer look at respect and how it applies to individuals, our community, and even our nation, we see that respect can be divided into 4 main categories. It's self-respect, respect for others, respect for possessions, yours and others, and respect for the environment. Every choice we make can be sorted into one or more of these 4 categories. And remember, as parents, as teaching parents, we're constantly reminding them to evaluate themselves. The actions that you display in front of your child, do they fall positively into one or more of these 4 categories here? And at the bottom of page 63, in the last paragraph, if you do not have this highlighted in your book, I encourage you to do so. It's 1 sentence, and it says, one of the most erroneous beliefs of our time is that respect must be earned. And one thing the Peaceful Solution stands very strongly on is that respect is freely given, trust is what is earned. And it's so important that we emphasize that. Everyone, just because they're a living member of society, they deserve respect, right? And if you go on to page 64, again, it's an evaluation sheet for our parents. What is your respect IQ? Have them go through this and reevaluate themselves. They took it back in lesson 8. We're into lesson 10 now. Have them reevaluate themselves. And encourage them to continue to do so as their child grows. Have you grown as a parent? Have your views changed? Has your character grown at the same time? All right, and our last point we're going to go over is page 67. Page 67, the first paragraph. It says, positive goals help build self-respect. Other important aspects of developing self-respect are to have purpose, goals, and a strong work ethic. And remember last week we really talked about having purpose in our lives. And whenever you see someone who kind of doesn't really know what they're doing with their life and they're just making decisions without considering the effects they have on others, it's because they don't have a purpose. They don't recognize what their direction in life should be. It says having purpose gives you a general direction in which to focus your thoughts and your energy. So it's redirecting yourself. If you're doing something or you're participating in, certain behaviors or risk-taking behaviors that takes you off your goal, then you'll recognize, okay, this isn't going to get me to my end goal. So I have to cut back on this, or I have to do more of this to get me where I wanted to go in the time frame that I've set for myself. All right, so we're going to jump over. Let's go back to lesson plan 10. So lesson plan 10, page 10C. And we're going to go into our scenarios here. All right, so scenario number 1 is your 4-year-old cries, hits, kicks when he or she does not want to do as asked. Other disciplinary measures have not worked. So over everything that we just reviewed, as parents, you have tried to implement all of these behaviors, and none of them have helped the child's behavior to change. So here's where we will tie in our rewards and consequences. Okay, so we're going to have a strict rewards and consequence. And if you have scenario number 1, I have a general outline for you of some ideas of consequences you can use in this scenario and rewards. All right, so one of the consequences that you could have is that every time they throw an item, they lose that item for an entire week. And you need to set it on a shelf so they recognize this is lost. And at the end of that week, even if they threw another item, every time they throw it, it goes on the shelf, but you keep track in a log, and a week from that day, they get it back. So not only do they recognize that the consequences is going to be implemented, but they also see that mom's paying attention, and she's also honest because she's giving it back to me and I earn it back at the same time. Okay, another consequence is that each time that they hit either you or another sibling, they have to sit in timeout for 4 minutes. And you can do whatever works for you, but generally for children that age, whatever age they are is how long they sit in timeout. Till they get to about 10, and then it gets a little too long. So for 4 years old, we're going to do 4 minutes. All right, but they have to sit there quietly, not yelling, not screaming, not telling you how much they hate sitting in the chair. They have to sit there quietly for 4 minutes. All right, another consequence is that you have them explain why they chose to behave this way. Of everything they could have done, why did they choose to hit? Why did they choose to throw them? All right, so then a rewards that you can do is you can make a deal, you can make like a big deal of putting stickers on the chart, which Jennifer showed us an example of a chart they gave us, and put like seven days on it. And when you get to the end of the 7 days, they can go get an ice cream cone, or they can get a snow cone, or they can make ice cream at home, make a sundae or something. All right, another one is have them list things that they would like to do. So as a 4-year-old, talk to them. What's something that you would like to do that you don't normally get to do with mommy and daddy all the time? And then every time they get to the 7 days and they get their stickers, one thing they want to do, you implement that week, so that they see that they're being able to be active in their rewards. All right, so that's certain ideas for scenario number 1. Now, as parents, you know your child, you know what they're going to like, what they don't like, what works for them and what doesn't. So that's another thing that you would do for themselves. All right, and another thing, we reference back to the environment. Okay, so for each of these scenarios, I want you to take into account the environment that the child is in at that time. If you take a 4-year-old and the only time they're really getting attention outside of a phone shoved in their hand is when they're getting in trouble, they're going to hit and they're going to throw things. Because mom gives me their undivided attention for a whole 20 minutes if I keep screaming. So consider that environment too. If that's the only time the child is spending time with you, that's what they're going to do. So interact with them. Have them help you, 4-year-olds make a mess, but have them help you wash dishes. Have them help you make pizza dough. I mean, that's a mess anyways. Bake biscuits, do something with you that they can interact with. And it's something that's fun for them and mommy to do, or, for them and daddy to do, that they do together to build that bond. All right, so we're going to go into activity number 2. You have an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old who treat each other disrespectfully. The older sibling is abusive towards the younger and will push or hit him or her. They can't seem to spend more than 5 minutes together without complaining, yelling, and screaming at each other. Other disciplinary measures have not worked. All right, so again, I gave you some examples of consequences and rewards for scenario number 2. One of the consequences, you can separate them. As much as siblings argue and fuss and fight, the cruelest thing is to separate them. They feel like they are missing a vital part of them, like they need to have them in the room with them. So that would be a consequence. When they want to play, you can still have playtime, but you cannot play with your sibling. You have to be in 2 separate rooms, or somebody has to be watching you all the time. You can't go outside, you can't go do this, you're separated. All right, another one is depending on, their abilities, but you can have them write sentences on how they should behave. And don't make them crazy. If they're 8 or 6 years old, have them write 10, 15 sentences. You give an 8-year-old 150 sentences, they are going to hate writing for the rest of their life. Okay, so we don't want to burden them, but we want them to emphasize in their mind, okay, this is how I should behave. All right, so that's what you're going to do for consequences. Some examples of rewards is one thing we did is if they're boys, we created like cutout cars, and we made like a finish line. So you had a path, and so every time they made the right choice, the car moved a little further up the path. So when you get to the end of it, and then when they get to the finish line, they got to earn something they wanted, whether it be an ice cream cone, a snow cone. If they like to build, you could get them Legos. You could get them a coloring book or a special pen, but something that they can work towards. All right, another one is go outside and play with your child. Spend that one-on-one time with them. See what interests them. When a child is in their zone, they're more interactive with the parents and they'll share, their mouth just runs freely when they're in their zone. All right, another thing is you can play card games or puzzles with them. And I tell you, if you want to build kindness and unity amongst your siblings, have them play a card game. You will find out things about your children that you did not notice. They have no patience. They have no self-control. They do not like when you skip them. And if you say Uno, it has to be loud enough so everybody can hear it, otherwise it doesn't count. Okay, so they learn to work alongside one another, but they're also having fun at the same time. All right, and another thing I want to point out, though, is that whenever we're teaching this to parents, always be on your toes and always be mindful, because you never know the questions that a parent is going to ask. And you never know a scenario that they're going to present in the class. And one scenario that a mother had shared with us is that when she was working with her 8-year-old, and since we're working with 8 and 6-year-olds, we're going to put this in here. She was working with her 8-year-old, and every time she gave him an instruction he didn't like, he'd yell back at her. And every time she gave him a consequence he didn't like, he'd yell back at her. But it was the phrase that she shared with us that threw me the most. And the phrase that he told her was, "That's fine, I'll just go kill myself." Where would an 8-year-old hear this? And she says, the thing that got her was, one, where did he get it from? And two, what do I do? Like, I knew he didn't know what he was talking about, so I just sent him to his room and told him not to say things he didn't mean. But how do you know he didn't mean it? How do you know he didn't understand? Yes, at 8 years old, most children, they don't understand death. They don't understand the permanent meaning of that word. But I have 2 articles that I want to share with you when it comes to 8-year-olds, and you hear this said for parents who might have heard this when it was cycling around when this mother shared it with us. Okay, they do know. An 8-year-old committed suicide. He fled from Cincinnati where he was being bullied. All right, and then from the son, sibling tragedy, a boy 8 was found hung in a basement alongside his 4-year-old sister. Okay, whenever we hear our children say things like this, don't overlook it, don't ignore it because they are too young or they don't know what they're saying. The 8-year-old might not have known that when he hung himself and his 4-year-old that their lives were over. He might not have known. But they recognize what it means. They knew enough about the act to get themselves to that point. And so as parents, when our children make offhand comments, stop everything right there and ask them, what do you mean? Why do you feel this way? Right? Engage in conversations like that, not where did you hear this? You shouldn't be saying this. I don't want to hear that come from your mouth again. Because the way we respond in that moment defines how the child grows further on and how they begin to understand and relate to things, later on in life as they become an adult or a teenager, and bullying gets worse in schools if this is their idea as an 8-year-old. So as we're working together to train to be teachers of parents, keep those things in mind, that you never know the question you might be asked, or the mother who's really struggling with knowing what to do with her child when she's not understanding what to say or how they got to this point, okay? So always educating and always being willing to recognize that this is the feeling of this child, and they're 8. They don't understand their emotions. They don't know what they're going through. But if you work through it with them, not only do they know what it means, but they can share it with another 8-year-old. Or when they hit their teens, they can share it with another teenager. This is what I learned. This is how I dealt with it. This is how I know. All right, so I just wanted to share that point with you guys since we're talking about 8-year-olds here. All right, so we're going to go into activity number 3, or scenario number 3, which is the teacher of your 10-year-old has informed you that your child is very disrespectful, disruptive at school, and this is interfering with him or her getting their schoolwork done. Other disciplinary measures have not worked. Okay, and before I go into the consequences and rewards, I want to go back to the environment. When you think of this and you read this story, what is this 10-year-old going through? What is his home life? Are his parents going through a divorce? Did his dad lose his job and now the parents are always arguing over money problems? Is he being bullied? Whenever your friends come over or the father's friends come over and they're talking, do they hear y'all saying negative things? Do they hear y'all being verbally abusive to one another, saying offhand comments that put down others, put down their teachers? Because all this environment goes in with this 10-year-old and the way he treats his teachers, the way that he treats his parents, all like the environment that as adults we just deal with or we live with or we move past it. They don't have all of those skills yet. All right, so for scenario number 3, the consequences, I have a few here. It says write down why they behave this way. So have them write down in their own words why they choose to behave this way, whether it be at school, whether it be at home. All right, one thing, you can have them clean the kitchen, the living room, or do laundry with you. And I know that sounds off the wall, but sometimes I do that with mine. And one thing that it does is when they're working with you, you can talk about pretty much anything because their hands are moving. And when their hands are moving, they're not so focused on what they're saying. So you can really get to the point of what was going on at school. Like, why did you say this? Why did you say that? What occurred last night that caused you to run to your room? Like that you locked yourself in your room when everybody else was over here playing, or they were writing or drawing. It opens that discussion for them. All right, so some rewards you can do for them is to put a chart on a whiteboard and show their improvements as they go. Another thing you can do is you can write them either an acknowledgement note or put it on the whiteboard, so when they run to it to see where they've made progress, they see that you've recognized what they've done, that you see an improvement in them, and they can go and read that. Another thing is to find what interests them and have them work towards it. If there's something they want to do and they're too young right now, but by the time they hit 12, they're able to do it, have them work towards that. So they have 2 years, but it's something that they can work towards doing. All right, activity or scenario number 4. Your family moved to a new area and your 13-year-old is having a hard time adjusting to the new school. You struggle trying to get him or her out of bed in the morning and to school on time. On top of that, you keep getting reports that from the teachers of a lack of interest in their subjects. And again, other disciplinary measures have not worked. And again, keep in mind our environment, okay? They moved to a new area. Is it a different time zone? It could be messing with their sleep schedule, where they're not adjusted. Are they missing their friends? They moved to an entirely new area. Are they feeling lonely? Are they going through, a displacement emotion where they don't know how they fit in? They're trying to figure it all out emotionally, so they don't really want to get out of bed in the morning. Figure out the environment and work through that and take all of that into consideration. All right, so some consequences that we have here in rewards. One of the consequences could be they have to go to bed 30 minutes earlier than they did the night before. And if it gets to like 6:30, then we're going to have to talk to them, because every single night 30 minutes is a bit much. But let's move it back there. Another thing is when it's time for bed, if they have a phone, a laptop, a tablet, or a computer, it comes to you. And they can earn it back. But if they refuse to get up on time, then they can lose it when it's time to go to bed. Another thing, they can spend extra time at the dinner table. Okay, so after supper is done and everyone is there before they ask to be excused, we're going to have a nice discussion of what we expect to be done tonight, to make them aware of what is expected of them. All right, some rewards that you can give them is to, again, find what interests them and have them work towards it. They're 13. There's a lot of activities that they can be getting involved in at school. There's a lot of things they could be doing at home to work towards achieving those. All right, you can write them acknowledgments, either a note or again on the whiteboard to leave that for them, but make a really big deal out of it when they wake up on time or when they, achieve something that they work towards. But be mindful of when we're thanking them that they don't get in the car and we say, "Finally, it's about time. I never thought I'd see the day you'd be out here before 8. See the difference? It puts the child in an emotional thing like, well, you didn't see the day. I'm just going to go right back out the car because you noticed it, but I felt like I didn't feel that. And that's another thing that on the consistent page that Jennifer went over is that whenever we make offhand comments or we belittle a child, then it makes them feel that, yeah, they achieved it, but they don't really feel like the conviction of what they did because it was just belittled to not be as big a deal as it is. All right, and so that concludes our time for tonight. Next week, we're going to pick up on reading our last activity scenario here, and then we will go into lesson 11. All right, I hope everyone has a wonderful week, and we'll meet you back here same time next Tuesday. Bye, everyone.